This video is on the psychodynamic approach. It's for paper 2 of the A-level psychology AQ8A specification. You'll need to know 16 marks worth of material, so this video will cover everything, although I am going to split the video into bite-sized chunks to make it more manageable. So when you hear the psychodynamic approach, the person that you need to think of is Sigmund Freud. And whenever you hear Freud, I want you to think of two things. I want you to think in an Austrian accent, because I'm pretty sure he was Austrian. I want you to think, tell me about your mother. Tell me about your childhood. Now, I look pretty stupid saying that, but I want you to get that into your mind, because Sigmund Freud was absolutely convinced that what happens to us in our childhood will impact on our behaviour later on in life, and particularly our relationship with our parents. And for him, the mother was extremely important. So when you hear psychodynamic approach, you're going to think, tell me about your mother, tell me about your childhood, and imagine Freud saying that to you. So the first part of the essay that you're going to need to know about is the idea of the unconscious. And Freud said that our minds are like icebergs. He called the mind the psyche, P-S-Y-C-H-E. You're going to need to know how to spell that. And he said that our psyche, our mind, is like an iceberg. So an iceberg only has about 10% of its mass above the water, and the huge bulk of the iceberg is beneath the water. And Freud said that that represents what's beneath the water, that huge chunk, that 90% of our psyche is beneath the water, and he said that that is unconscious. So he said we are only really aware of about 10% of what we're doing. And the other 90% is all deep-rooted in the unconscious, which comes about through the psychosexual stages of development, which we'll talk about in a bit, and also what happens to us in our childhood, what happens to, with our relationship with our parents. All of those things are deep-rooted in our unconscious and affect our behaviour as adults. So he says that what happens to us in childhood is all beneath the water, it's all subconscious, and it affects what we do. So Freud believed that most of our everyday actions and behaviours are not controlled consciously, but are the product of the unconscious mind. And he said the unconscious reveals itself in three ways: through a slip of the tongue, which we know is now called we call it a Freudian slip, through neurotic symptoms. So if someone's being neurotic, then that means they might be displaying quite unusual behaviours, like they might be talking to themselves, they might have a panic attack, they might have a phobia, they might have anxiety. So those neurotic symptoms. So the unconscious reveals itself in the neurotic symptoms. And also Freud said through creativity. So if we are creating something, then our unconscious will reveal itself. So we might be creating a poem or a play or a piece of artwork or a dance piece or something. So anything that is creative that we conjure up in our minds, Freud says that the unconscious reveals itself through that.
A good example of this is from Tracy Emin's art installation called My Bed, which was shortlisted for the 1999 Turner Prize. If you Google it, then you could try and identify what her creativity revealed about her unconscious. And you could also identify your own examples of the unconscious being revealed through creativity.
When he said that the unconscious reveals itself through a slip of the tongue, or a Freudian slip, you may have heard that expression, and it's when you say the wrong thing. You mean to say one thing, but something completely different comes out of your mouth, and you're like, I didn't mean to say that. Freud says that you did mean to say it, it was in your unconscious, and it just kind of comes out when you're least expecting it. There's loads of things on YouTube that show Freudian slips. I've put some links to other YouTube videos in the description of this so you can see what I'm talking about.
So a Freudian slip is you mean to say one thing but accidentally say something else, and Freud says we say what is in our unconscious. And this example shows you a dentist who says, as a dentist, I'm very interested in oral sex. Oops, I meant to say oral hygiene. I've used that example because Freud was pretty obsessed with sex. And so Freud says that what is in your unconscious just slips out of your mouth by mistake, and it reveals what's in your unconscious.
So the next thing you need to know about is the structure of the personality. And Freud said that the psyche is split into 3 different sections: the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, you've probably heard the word ego because we use the word ego in everyday society. We might use it in a derogatory way and say, oh, that person's got such a huge ego, and it means they're kind of big-headed. Forget that. In psychology, the ego is the really important, well, they're all important, but it's really important. The ego is the part of the personality that is, it's sensible, it allows us to have like a nice life and to make good decisions. The id is the part of the personality that is crazy, demanding, jealous, selfish, greedy. I think I said greedy. And Freud said all of us have that part of our psyche, this id. And so if you want something, you want it now. And so if you were hungry, you would just like stuff your mouth, you'd stuff your face full of food, and like maybe like really unhealthy foods. And it wouldn't matter where you were. It wouldn't matter if it was inappropriate to be eating, like if you're in the middle of an exam or something. The id would be like, well, I don't care. Give it to me. Boom, give it to me now. So, and the other thing about the id, Freud says that the libido is in the id, and everyone has a libido. It kind of means your sex drive, but Freud said that the libido is deep rooted in that id, and so if the id is in control, then your libido might be out of control, which means that your sex drive would be out of control, which might be very difficult for you and other people concerned. The third part of the personality is called the superego. So it's in direct opposition to the id. The superego is the moralistic part. It's like overly moralistic. It's the part that feels guilty and anxious and doesn't want you to do anything for fear, like death or disease, or that it's just not the right thing to do. It's all panicky and anxious. So you've got this crazy id on one side, which is like, rah, I want everything, I want it now. You've got the superego on the other side, which is all like, oh no, you can't do this because it's wrong and it's morally wrong and you shouldn't do it. And so you've got the ego in the middle, and that's why the ego is so important, because it's balancing out the demands of the id and the superego all the time. You might imagine the id to be your little devil on your shoulder, and the superego to be a little angel on your shoulder, and the ego is constantly kind of listening to both parts and trying to work out the best thing to do. And it doesn't want you to be overly greedy, and it doesn't want you to be overly anxious, because that both of those paths lead to destruction. So the ego has got a really important job to balance out those two things. So if you are studying this for your A-level, then you might want to do this little exercise. So I want you to identify and record how each part of the psyche feels and behaves when presented with a chocolate cake, which you can see in this picture. Also how it would feel and behave when presented with homework, alcohol, and public transport. So how would the id, ego, and superego deal with homework? What would the id say to do with it, and what would the superego do, and how does the ego balance them out? So that's just a little exercise for you to consolidate your learning on the structure of the personality. So I'm going to cut now to, so the second part of this video is going to be on ego defense mechanisms, and there's a link for it here, hopefully.